Welcome to my political channel, but it's not what you think. I am politically homeless. I'm not doing any partisan stuff. No Democrat, no Republican. I'm not a liberal or a conservative. I just want to analyze what's going on so I can understand. A long time ago, I first took to politics when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and it was the early 2000s. So the Bush administration was in power, and I wasn't really into them, but I wasn't really paying much attention to politics either. What ended up happening was America was attacked by terrorists on 9/11 who were a group from Afghanistan, not from the government, but just they were hiding out there. They positioned themselves there. The Bush administration started to make an argument that we need to go to war against Iraq. That was really weird to me, and I started to pay a little bit of attention. And what happened next was they made a whole case about trying to tie Iraq to weapons of mass destruction and, to the terrorist attacks from the terrorists in Afghanistan who were Al Qaeda. Something didn't really add up to me, and so I started focusing in more. As the argument was made as the argument was continuously made to go to war in Iraq, I thought that I was kind of against it, and I started to take to the liberal left-wing side of politics because those were the group of people who were against the war. It seemed to me kind of weird because we had George W. Bush as the president. Two presidents before that, his father, George H.W. Bush, was the president. During the time H.W. Bush was the president, he had gone to war in Iraq against Saddam Hussein. Now his son becomes president and goes to war in Iraq against Saddam Hussein. I was like, what does this have to do with what happened on 9/11? It's kind of weird. It's like got nothing to do with it. But they loosely tried to tie it together, and I wasn't buying into it. I thought like I was being scammed or something. So what I started to do was just watch. I just watched what was going on, and I figured out George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, he was in the oil and gas business at some point in Texas. That was, drilling for oil is a big deal in Texas. When H.W. Bush went to war with Iraq in, I think it was like 1990 or the early 90s, they were going to war in an oil-rich country by a president who was in the oil business. It was a short war. They won it quickly. It was America just completely overpowered the troops in Iraq. So George W. Bush becomes the president. We get attacked on 9/11 by Al Qaeda. And then Bush decides to go declare war against Iraq. And I'm like, George W. Bush, the son, was also involved in the oil business. And Iraq still has a lot of oil. And Iraq was run by Saddam Hussein, a rogue dictator who was controlling a lot of the oil from the Middle East. And that was kind of suspicious to me that son of Bush wanted to go to war there. You add to the fact that the government in Afghanistan were allies with America. The war in Afghanistan that ensued quickly after the war in Iraq was about the terrorists who were hiding out there. So the Afghanistan government agreed to have the U.S. government send troops in to help deal with it. But to make matters even more weird, the leader of Afghanistan was actually in an oil deal with George H.W. Bush and Dick Cheney, who was George W. Bush's vice president. So all this started to seem very suspicious. The people who were protesting the war were Democrats in Congress. People like me took to being a Democrat at that time. I was a young man, 19 years old, and I took to left-wing politics because I was just so against these wars. Now, on to the financial part of it. When Bill Clinton left office in 1999, he was running a budget surplus. He managed to balance the budget so that America was taking in more money than it was spending out in expenses for operating the country. The national debt when Bill Clinton left office was $4 trillion. So George W. Bush takes office during a budget surplus. The first thing this George W. Bush guy does, who was in a lot of big business stuff, is he gave tax cuts to businesses and wealthy people. Well, W. Bush in the early 2000s, I will say he gave tax cuts to 100% of Americans. That means if people were the poorest of the poor, and the people in the middle class, and the people at the top, and the 0.01% at the tippy top all got tax cuts, whether they needed it or not. He said, you're paying too much in taxes, because he was referring to Bill Clinton's taxes. What happened after that was it ended the budget surplus and turned it into a deficit. It turned it into America now spending more money than it's taking in. At the same time as that, Bush decides to do this Iraq war and then the Afghanistan war, and it spent a lot of money. Democrats became the fiscally conservative ones and the anti-war party at that time. They were saying, all the protesters on the left were saying no blood for oil. And the Democrats in Congress were saying the same thing. And some of the Democrats in Congress had voted for the Iraq war and regretted it later and started standing up against it. Then, by the time George W. Bush leaves office, the national debt had $6 trillion added to it. He leaves with $10 trillion in debt just for this war over the oil business. Barack Obama takes office after George W. Bush. He took office when there was a housing market crash because the mortgage industry went under because they were doing predatory lending and people couldn't pay their debts back, and everything in that sector of the market just went kaput. So, Barack Obama inherits that mess. Plus, the Iraq and Afghanistan war were still dragging on. At the heights of those wars, they were costing between $500 billion to $900 billion a year. Obama takes office. He's got debts, deficits, he's got 2 wars going on, and a housing market collapse. During the time the Bush administration was spending all the country's money on more and then some, they did not have enough money for infrastructure, healthcare, education, social justice, or any of that stuff. So what happened was, Barack Obama was like, we need to focus more inward on the country, even though we don't have any money, because certain like bridges and roads are collapsing and certain other things are lacking. So Barack Obama took office and the Democrats took a majority in the House and the majority in the Senate. Obama used all the political capital he had to get the laws he wanted through Congress. He got the healthcare law through. He got a big infrastructure plan through. He did a number of other things. Throughout the Obama administration, Democrats who voted for him were pleased with the outcome of what he did generally. He also managed to make the wars less expensive by, instead of sending massive amounts of troops out, he worked with some of the infrastructure that George W. Bush created, like Joint Special Operations Command, to make some of the military actions less expensive, more efficient, and to do some of the most damage they could with the fewest amount of people and resources. But it still cost a lot of money to fix the problems inside the country while maintaining these wars. So, Barack Obama did wind these things down, but by the time he left office, they added another $9 trillion to the debt. And even though Democrats liked the plans, you still have to understand the financial reality that these were spending bills. Obama leaves office with a $19 trillion national debt. Now, in addition to this, America defaulted on its debt at some point during the Obama administration. Workers were being furloughed. Portions of the government were being shut down. It was kind of crazy. Eventually, Congress struck a deal to borrow more money and raise the debt ceiling. And that just added to more debt. And that's why Obama left with the, $19 trillion in debt. Between Donald Trump coming in, leaving, Joe Biden coming in, leaving, Biden leaves with, we're at $36 trillion in national debt where it stands now in 2025. That's crazy. The interest rate on that is $1 trillion a year. And they're running a $3 trillion deficit last year. So the budget for 2024, America brought in $3 trillion in tax revenue. They spent $6 trillion in expenses, adding $3 trillion to the debt. If that trend of $2 to $3 trillion in debt continues, it could be like $45 to $50 trillion in debt besides Trump leaves office. My thing is isolating this, realizing that the money issue and the expenditures is going to be a separate issue from partisan politics, our opinions, our beliefs. Because no matter who wins in politics, no matter what decisions get made, no matter what agendas get put in place, they all cost money, and we've basically gone bankrupt, run out of money. How are we going to have a country if we just keep spending like this? Can we just go on with our country with debts and deficits? Can we just continue on with spending more money than we're taking in? Do we leave our generations, kids and grandkids, with $100 trillion in debt, $150 trillion in debt? Do we just keep doing this until we end up owing more money than there is in the entire world, and then print more money and cause inflation, and then deal with that by printing even more money, then have hyperinflation? Like, what is going to happen? Different economists have different estimates about what's going to happen with the money, depending on what they're looking at and how they crunch the numbers or whatever. Let's just say that I'm not an expert on the details of it, but by some economists' estimates, we're headed for another government shutdown in 2 years. I want to be clear about what I'm going to speak on next. Anything that I say is not support for a specific person. It is not liking or disliking a person. Is not about my feelings, and I'm sorry, is not about your feelings. This is just going to be a cold, analytical discussion at this point. You're allowed your opinions. You have the right to believe what you want. I'm not going to argue with you. You can just deal with what you need to deal with in your political mindset. And especially if I'm an American, you're an American. If you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, I believe that everybody who's fighting for their political side has good intentions. We're all Americans. We're all trying to do the best we can, and we're all trying to make the decisions we think is best for ourselves, our families, and the country. So I'm not judging you if your opinions are such. I'm just going to say this. The two people who come in claiming they're going to deal with debts and deficits happen to be Donald Trump and Elon Musk of all people. Like, what the heck is that? You know, and it gets weird because they're constantly portrayed as villains. And I think Donald Trump is a shady past. I'm not going to get into all this stuff, but let's just say I'm not praising anyone. Now, Elon Musk, I have studied him in the sense that I run a technology business. I want to learn how to do business better. So I've studied like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, but not in like a way of like the way the press bashes them and not in a way of their fanboys prop them up. I just studied them like, how can I do business better by learning from them? And one thing I found was going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I'm going to circle back around so this will make sense. Please bear with me. Steve Jobs used to run his business in a very special way. He avoided corporate bloat and bureaucracy from getting in the way of progress. Think about how much Apple did with the iPhones and the iPads and their Apple computers and how much they innovated and how they did it fast. One thing Steve Jobs did was avoided how some businesses have this massive infrastructure with like all these, boards of directors and all these different big giant departments and a bunch of executives and all these managers, and things have to get filtered through 20 different people before one little decision is made. Companies that do that are slow and don't innovate. So Steve Jobs figured this: divide his company up into very small teams, have each team operate like a startup business so that each team can move fast and innovate fast. He'd even have two teams sometimes work on the same thing and figure out which one was doing better. Then he knew how to cut fat and waste out of each of the teams. Keep a giant company like that moving very quickly without the bureaucracy and the bloat getting in the way. Elon Musk copied that whole method. That's why he runs multiple massive businesses that get so much done in such a short time. He just keeps moving through team to team. Like, he travels all around. And I'm just saying his CEO style. This is not I like him or dislike him. I'm just explaining his CEO style. He moves into some small team, takes care of business, moves on to the next one, does that fast. He closes bottlenecks. He avoids bureaucratic bloat. Some companies like Google are so full of bureaucracy that they innovate slower than like OpenAI and Elon Musk companies. So Musk did that by copying the Steve Jobs playbook. Now, when I heard that Elon Musk is going to be doing Department of Government Efficiency, I'm taking two things into account here for the sake of reality to just understand what is what. You have a massive amount of valid criticism against Elon Musk at the same time as he does amazing things that are going to lower carbon emissions. What he wants to do with Mars is complicated, but that has to do with the survival of the human species in the long term by becoming a spacefaring species. People might sound like, why even bother doing that? Physicists kind of get it, but it's like, people are going to go to Mars and live the rest of their short lives there, and it's going to cost like $1 trillion. No one wants to pay for it, so there's that. But I get it. You got two sides to this. Like, there is everything. When I heard Elon Musk is going to do government efficiency, I thought two sides to this. I'm like, I don't really know if I want to just go with like all the negative press and people I know who just are against him because he's so self-serving, or if what I understand from studying him as a CEO for 2 years and how he gets things done quickly, closes bottlenecks, and knows how to save a lot of money and whatever. So I just decided to kind of sit back and watch and just kind of see what's going to happen, because this now is going to affect the debts and deficits that I have been kind of watching since all the way back in the Bush administration. That's why this became curious to me. Not because I'm cheering for anybody, I'm cheering for the country. No matter who's in power, whether I voted for them or not, I'm not rooting for them to fail because I don't want the country to fail. So if someone I did not vote for or do not like makes a decision that I think is the right decision, that becomes a separate thing. Because in partisan politics, my side and my people are good. Everyone on the other side are villains, when my thinking logically is multiple things can be true at the same time. The trouble with any politician coming forward, any politician, any party, president, Congress, whatever, the problem with any politician saying, listen, we're bankrupt, we've run out of money, we need to cancel all the government programs and stop spending money, get the balance sheet straightened out, and then we can go back to our spending bills and our whatever. whoever says that is basically committing political ending of their own, career. People vote for Democrats thinking we want social policies, we like what Democrats do, and it just costs a lot of money. And I think sometimes people just kind of overlook that because they feel like what they're voting for with the Democrats and what the Democrats will do, a lot of people feel is the right thing. I voted for them too. I had been a Democrat for a long time. Right now, I've totally stepped back because right now I'm just like, For the first month or so of his presidency, Donald Trump has been slashing programs and cutting everything he can by executive order. At the same time, Elon Musk is investigating a lot of the spending in government. Now, what they're doing with the budget is kind of three different categories. You have stuff that they have the ability by executive order to just stop. They have other things that they can put on a temporary pause. And they have other things that they do not have the authority to stop because it's appropriated by Congress, but they can still audit it and check the spending. So you have to understand that there's all three categories of those things as Donald Trump and Elon Musk go and slash budget. Now, what I'm talking about is just the money. You or I might have certain laws or government programs we like that were slashed. But part of my thinking here is we're out of money, whether I like the people in power or not, whether I like their decisions or not, and whether all the stuff people are speculating about what they're really doing in government is true or not. Any of those things could be a thing. I'm just saying we're out of money. We're bankrupt. That's just a fact. So what happens next? I decided to just take a step back for a minute when I heard that Elon Musk wants to try to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget. And this is like separate from whatever people are suspicious or concerned about. I understand that. It's just there's such little money that if they have to cut programs that really help people, their thinking must be, well, maybe if we have to tighten our belts now and we have to make some sacrifices now, we can have a better future. That's my hope for what they're doing. I can't just show up to them and say, stop cutting budget, keep these programs for people. I have no control over it. I just hope for the best. And I hope that what they're doing is going to lead to a better future, even if it's tough now. And I hope that means a better future for everyone who needs it. Elon Musk swooping into the Treasury for a weekend and just leaving quickly seems weird to people. But like I explained before and how he runs his businesses, that's kind of his normal workflow. So I'm still over here kind of just scratching my beard. Like I don't fully know what's going to happen. And I think they have to wait a while before actual numbers are released, but their aim is to cut $2 trillion from the budget. I also found out certain facts along the way that this is just the nuts and bolts of it. The type of organization that DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is done by executive order. Executive orders by a president have very flimsy legal legs to stand on. They can be undone by a federal judge. There are 870 federal judges. Any one of them can say no and sign a court order at any time. They actually have already been pushing back against DOGE. There's also the issue that Congress can pass a law undoing it. Right now, the Republicans have a majority in the House and the Senate. Democrats could take a majority there, and they might kind of have a chance to get a bill forward, but then the president could veto it, so that's kind of tough. But understand this. Elon Musk only has 130 days to do his job because the type of special government employee he is a temporary position. After 130 days, he has to leave or his status has to change. The other thing is, even if all the stuff that Trump did by executive order is in place through his presidency, if he leaves after his term is up, any president who comes in after can, by the stroke of a pen, undo his executive orders. I even believe it's just a matter of reality or a matter of course that someone is eventually going to do that just because, someone's going to have to bring back the programs that were cut. So whether anyone likes it or not, someone in the future is probably just going to undo those executive orders and bring some of these programs back. I personally have faith in the institutions, particularly the federal courts. I watched them push back against Trump a lot. In his first presidency, when he was shooting from the hips and doing things so randomly and so impulsively, federal judges kept putting the smackdown on him over and over again. And what the federal judges are doing now is gradually pushing back against DOGE. Now, you have to understand, those judges are judicious. They follow a process. Before they make a ruling, they investigate what they're doing, they get peer review, they make sure that the ruling that they're going to make is actually lawful and matches up with the law, and they have to do some analysis. So if the federal courts are going to push back, they're not just going to show up all at once and just say, okay, DOGE is done. They have to follow a process. So they may gradually, continuously push back against DOGE as they investigate what's going on and make appropriate rulings. I have faith in the courts and the institutions, regardless of who's in power. I welcome you to leave comments, give your opinion. I respect your opinion, whether it's one way or the other. Just please keep the comments respectful. I think that we need to have a productive discussion. If you made it to the end of this video, I know all of this is very difficult. People are very emotional right now, and I appreciate your patience as I just say my piece of it as an American with free speech. From now on this channel, I'm going to be doing probably reaction videos to political stuff that I find on YouTube that's going to kind of be off the cuff. If you're interested in seeing that and you want my perspective on it, not me jamming my ideology down your throat, just a perspective, then please subscribe and watch my next video that I make. Take care of yourself, be kind to each other. I'll see you in the next one. I'm going to make another video where I explore how the national debt might even pay off in the future and what those investments go to. That's the whole other side to this, and it's worth a separate video.